Hello, Divine Femmes, and welcome today to today's Magnetic Muse episode. Today, I want to talk about detachment, but not in the way that Instagram talks about it. I want to talk about neutrality. I want to talk about what happens when you think you've healed, and then a man from your past walks back in and destabilizes you, because that's what's happened to me. And it showed me exactly where the rupture still lived. Back in 2019, I had an awakening. I had my first spiritual awakening. And one of my first teachers I was guided to work with, she taught me psychic development. But before we learned anything about intuition, we actually learned neutrality, about being able to connect with our higher consciousness and rise above the emotions. That core teaching of neutrality helped me to develop a deep embodied understanding of detachment. That detachment became a foundation for me to walk through life and become deeply magnetic, to follow synchronicities, to loosen my grip on outcomes, to open up to potentials and pathways that I hadn't even imagined. I thought I was deeply, deeply secure. And in fact, in many ways in my life, I was. But when this man came back, what I found was that I reverted into this deep fear of loss, because what he triggered was a deep abandonment wound. So neutrality is the ability to separate yourself from the emotional charge of any experience and to become the witness, the neutral observer. You can say, I'm feeling this, but I'm not this. This was revolutionary, because before neutrality, if I felt rejected, I became rejection. I made it mean something about me at my core. I've recently come up with a mantra that I want to use with the women in the receptivity codes, which is standards, not stories. Because when you have standards, you're living from your values. You're not attached to the meaning, and you're not outsourcing your power or your worth or your lovability to whether somebody else validates it or not. When that is happening, you know that you're moving from the wound. And that's what we do. We decode and we unpack and we remove the wound that is recreating that story. If I felt anxious, I became anxiety. There was no space. And space is what detachment actually is. After that awakening, I chose celibacy. I went on a journey of individuation. I went to find myself. I returned to my power. And in November 2024, I made a declaration. I said to the universe, I am ready for sacred union, not situationships, not intensity, not spiritual fantasy, partnership. I had evolved very deeply and become deeply aware of my soul's deepest desires and my heart's desires for a conscious partnership, to recreate templates for relating that I had never seen or never had. I wanted the ability to choose each other consciously. I wanted a relationship where there was high levels of emotional intelligence, deep connection, deep trust, and it's something that I hadn't had role models of. But when I made that declaration, 3 significant men from my past came back. One from 7 years ago, one from 10 years ago, and one who had been in and out of my life consistently. The one who came back from 7 years ago was one of the triggers and catalysts to my first spiritual awakening and deep, deep awareness that I could no longer accept or tolerate abusive dynamics. And that was the first time I ever became aware of trauma bonding. That led me into a deep journey of shadow work and deep levels of inner work. So I became, I developed deep self-love. I developed values. I developed an understanding of how to recognize when something was toxic and not to engage with that anymore. Whereas at that stage in my life, even though I was a high achieving woman, I was educated, I was still mired and trapped in these cycles of tolerating very, very low relational standards. And that was a self-worth issue, but it was also attachment wounding. It was also being stuck in what was familiar, because our nervous system will always choose what is familiar. So when the Ghost of Lovers Past number 3 came back, I knew he was a mirror, and I knew that I was being initiated. And what was happening was my consciousness was mirroring my splits. It was showing me what hadn't been integrated. When the third man came back, the one I believed I could build a life with at 30, I thought, wow, this is it. He's returned. This is divine timing. This is my soulmate. And everything I knew about embodiment, magnetism, flow, all collapsed. I started chasing. I was spiraling over texts. I was waiting. I was longing. I was obsessing. And the less interest he showed, the more I pursued. And this is where the rupture revealed itself. Instead of using his behavior as information, I used it as proof that I wasn't enough. He was mirroring to me the deepest wounding that experience at 30 with him hadn't been integrated. So my inner child consciousness was rearing up. I'm not lovable. I'm not being chosen. Why aren't you choosing me? And this is, attraction was killed, but I also found myself performing. How can I make him want me? How can I make him choose me? It was rooted in fear. The story from my inner child emerged: you're not lovable. You weren't chosen. You need to try harder. I believed that if I could just get him to see me, he would wake up and realize he'd made a mistake. This is not detachment. This is abandonment wound activation. The more we attach to something, the more we tighten our grip on something, the more you know that you're actually being driven by fear. Attachment is about fear. So the witness returned and something shifted. I began to witness myself. I saw who I was being. I saw that I was chasing a man who was not choosing me. I saw that I was abandoning myself to feel chosen. I was begging energetically, waiting, shrinking, trying to secure love through effort. And that was the original rupture. When I was 30, he left me to return to his wife. That created, also bear in mind, I didn't know he was married. It was completely blindsiding, where we had this deep, intense is a key word, connection that felt so intoxicating and so much like love. And then after 4 months, and literally on Valentine's Day, so it's ironic that today is Valentine's Day, he said, I'm going back to raise my son. And that was the way he framed it. I didn't know he was married. We even went on holiday together later because we'd already booked it in the April. And when I came back, his wife called me and said, why were you on holiday with my husband? And this is when I found out he was married. That really took a big toll on me. And I didn't realize that actually this pattern, this imprint, was a big reason why I was choosing not to enter into intimate partnership. It was an unconscious defense mechanism and a protection. So it created a deep abandonment imprint that I had never really fully resolved. And sacred union cannot enter where rupture is unintegrated. So instead of chasing him, I turned inward. This is where the real work began. I did the same work that I guide women through inside the receptivity codes. I did not bypass it. I didn't pretend I was above it. I located the wounds, the inner child who believed she wasn't chosen, the part of me that equated love with waiting, the part of me that confused intensity with destiny. What I found as well was that I would create fantasy in my mind. There was a big gap between reality and the potential that I was creating in my mind. And I brought neutrality to it. I observed it without becoming it. Now that is the detachment. It's not indifference. It's not pretending you don't care, but it's staying grounded while feeling deeply. And when I stopped chasing, I stopped collapsing, and I remembered who I was. Here's what I want you to understand. Detachment is not about wanting or not wanting love. It's about not abandoning yourself to get it. It's about using behavior as an information. When you're reclaiming deep self-worth, and this is the thing, you're competent, you're high achieving, you're beautiful, but when the pattern is running the show, you feel as though you can't create the love that you want. And it's not conscious. You can't mindset your way out of this. If he pulls away, that's information. If he doesn't choose you, that's information. Secure love requires an integrated nervous system. And if you spiral when he pulls back, it's not because you're weak. It's because there is an unresolved imprint asking to be healed. Sacred union will expose every split. And if you're willing to witness instead of chase, you evolve. That's the work. That's the work we do inside receptivity codes. It's not teaching you to be cold, but teaching you how to remain sovereign while loving. Because relationships work best when you're at your best, when you're grounded, regulated, self-led, And from that place, you don't wait to be chosen. You choose.